my question for you now is, how do you thread the needle on being um, authentic, being open, while also not allowing yourself to be um, targeted? Or uh, another way to say it, again, another one of my clients was very vulnerable through this COVID situation, saying, "Hey, look, I'm going through this. This is how I feel. I'm kind of stressed." And she initially thought that was good, and the supervisor wanted to hear it. But later on, the supervisor used that information against her.
Yep.
Said, "Well, I know that you're stressed right now, but you need. Why are you bringing this up? That has nothing to do with my work right now." Oh, well,
Right.
how do you do both? Can you do both?
Can you? Yes. So uh, this conversation is like, I feel like we have really touched something that's I'm kind of passionate about. So if I get a little excited, just signal. But we've there is such a difference between being the type of leader who can provide a psychological safe space. If you're gonna ask people to be vulnerable, they have to feel safe to do so. And I see leaders who have now been taught, oh, because you want to have this influence and this trust, ask people how they're doing. We have all these trendy words. Let people show up in their whole self. Bring your whole self to work. And then they bring their whole self. And you go, whoa, wasn't exactly hoping to get all that. Right. And now we have this issue where my part of my 360 degrees is being used as a dart. Well, here's the thing. If you are at a position, if you're the employee or the team member, or in a lot of spaces, even the leader, and you're venting or you're sharing, you have to be sure the safe space is truly safe. And what I mean by that is you have to be sure that what you're saying, if it's repeated, you're okay with it. That's see, we put all the onus of being a safe space on the individual who's listening, right? We put all of the work, all of the responsibility on the person who's opened the door. But in a conversation that's two ways, it's not just their responsibility to make sure it's safe. We also have a responsibility to make sure it's safe. So the psychological safety starts with what I'm opening my mouth to say.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, there's a level of responsibility that comes with these new team dynamics and bringing our whole selves to work. So yes, I want you to come and feel comfortable to talk about what may be happening, but I also want you to be a responsible adult. I want you to be a responsible team member. I want you to be, do you see it? I want you to be vulnerable, professional. And I've got to be sure that your safest, most intimate conversations are happening where you are actually intimate. What I mean by that is vulnerability, yes. Intimacy, no. Intimate conversations happen with those people you have intimate relationships, right? So we tell people, bring your whole selves to work, and they come and they pour out, and because we don't put the boundary out clear. We don't set the rules. When we have safe spaces, if I'm facilitating a healing space, there's a set of agreements for that space. Here are the agreements. And if you're going to participate in this conversation, here are the boundaries so that we can establish some psychological safety. And I expect them to abide by them, or they get muted. And they get muted because I have a responsibility for their safety, but they also have a responsibility for their safety. And in the world of Zoom and Teams, and if you're still using it, Skype, and whatever other tool you're using, right? And recordings and digital footprints, we cannot simply say, well, they told me I could bring my whole self, so I'm going to lay in the bed, keep my curlers in, and just let it all out. That is not what the point is, we have to be professionally responsible. We still have a responsibility to show ourselves as the expert professional, the team member, and we keep our most intimate emotions, feelings, needs, and desires where we have an intimate relationship.
I love everything you just shared right now. I'm hoping, I'm hoping, I'm sure everyone who's listening just took a bunch of notes, and because I know I'm going to be going right back through this recording, taking notes myself. Um, One, I really appreciate what you said about those boundaries, the rules, setting guidelines ahead of time. We actually, I just moderated a panel for the ATD, Association for Talent Development, one of their annual conferences, and we were focused on career development for government employees. And one of the questions was, how should we prepare supervisors to have these very difficult conversations? There was Black Lives Matter going on, there was COVID going on, like they're being expected to have some very difficult conversations. And so there's a lot about, be authentic, let them share, da, da, da. But I think that's a very valuable component that was missing that you just mentioned, which is have some ground rules beforehand so
Right.
that people don't wander into an area that they don't intend on going.
That's right.
Another component you mentioned is the responsibility, and I'm not sure if this is where you're going, but I'm gonna make a statement. You can feel free to push back or go with. Um, my whole thing is always, I want you to be intentional and be thinking about how you can progress yourself forward in your career. Yes, sometimes some people may do things the way they want to do it, um, but that may not be what's best for you. And what I'll use an example is sometimes, if anyone who's watching, you can see I'm a black male. I'm a black guy, and I I know, right? What's driver's loss? So but I remember earlier on in my career where I wanted to come to work wearing hoodies and things like some of my other counterparts were doing. And I was very quickly reminded that that was not something that I could do, because of how I would be perceived in the office place and so on and so forth. And so there's just realities. And so I guess I say is that, yes, I want people to be authentic, but I also want them to be very cognizant of what that means. When you share something, what does that mean? What do they have now? They have that information. But do you want them to have the information? Realize that they may be taking that information into consideration without even knowing it. It could be unconscious in the back of their head
That
because they know it. So be very careful of what you share.
there are a few things that we talk about. One of them is names. So when you send in a resume, the reviewer may not intentionally say, I do or do not want this person, but our names, I know there's plenty of research on just the difference in hiring processes, and it's
Mhm.
unconscious, right? That is not an explicit bias. They're not deliberately saying, I don't want to hire anybody with the name Shukamuka, whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
But we
Mhm.
know these
Yeah.
things exist. So we talk about that a lot, that digital footprints are a lot like names. Um, we talk about AI, using an AI in your home. So whether you use, Amazon's product or Google's product or Apple's product, those recordings being footprints. Well, what you say in the workplace is still a footprint. It's indelible. You can't pull it back,
Yeah.
much that same way. And so we don't always acknowledge that. When you said, how we dress, how we appear, that's a footprint. It's done now. It's indelible. That's a mark that I made. And so you have to be sure you're willing for that to stay there. See, that's the difference. We say, yes, be authentic. But what does that mean? Does that mean I'm supposed to be the same place at work as I am at home? And as much as people would love to say, oh, yeah, no,
Mm-mm.
no. And it isn't about being untrue to your core. See, I'm not asking anyone to ever not be who they are in their core. What I'm saying is the way I show up when I go to one of my best friends is Muslim. And when I go to their home, the way I show up in her home, because I honor her home in that space, is not the way I show up in my home. So, though that isn't how I practice faith, when I'm there, my clothing is different, right? Because I can respect there's a difference in how we move in that space. Much like professionally, we can pretend, because it is pretend, to say, oh yes, just bring your whole self and just be your, to ask a leader, a manager, a supervisor to open themselves to the onslaught of words and emotions that comes around with these conversations without them being prepared as a clinical psychologist, as a sociologist, as a counselor. It is irresponsible on the part of the company to ask them to facilitate that type of conversation. And I say that, and I know I'll get pushback, but you cannot teach people in a day to handle race relations. If that were the case, we wouldn't be having all these issues with diversity in the workplace, right? And then we just go, oh, let them talk about it. Okay, so once they're crying on the call, what do I do next? You have to give them tools. If you're going to say do it, then you have got to prepare them to handle it.
Hello, everyone. This is Alex Tremble from GPS Leadership Solutions. And if you found this last interview to be awesome, spectacular, and actually you benefited from it, let me tell you, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Visit the alextrembleshow.com, information below in the description, and that's where you'll find the full uninterrupted interview. And I'm telling you, there's so much great content you'll hear from this past leader, as well as all the other leaders we've already interviewed. So remember, don't just look back, reach back. If there's someone who you think will benefit from this interview or any of the other interviews, make sure you share it with them. Click the like, click the subscribe, and as I always at the end of all my sessions, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving.